Well, if you have a Bible handy, I'd invite you to turn to Luke chapter 24. And the story begins from verse 13. Have you been catching up with the story about Captain Tom Moore, the 99-year-old English war veteran who walked 99 laps of his rather large yard to raise funds for the NHS? And now, Captain Tom has a #1 hit song. Captain Tom isn't much of a singer, to be honest, but it's a great song that kindles hope. You'll never walk alone. And it could well be the theme tune for this gospel story of hope and joy for some disciples whose dreams had fallen over. So let's take a look at the story. This is one of 3 resurrection appearances in Luke's account of Jesus. This is the longest one, and it involves ordinary disciples. It has the feel of an eyewitness account that made it through to Luke's final text. Perhaps Luke heard it from these 2 disciples directly. It has very much a first-hand feel to it. Well, like most of the events of Luke's gospel that take place on a journey, this does too. Jesus journeys from humble origins in his home village in Galilee to the climax of his death and resurrection in Jerusalem. And this gospel is set on a journey from the high point of Jerusalem to the anticlimax of coming home to Emmaus with dreams shattered. Emmaus was about 10 kilometres from Jerusalem, and I think I've pretty much been very close to it. We drove past. The scene opens with 2 sad and confused disciples travelling home, trying to make sense of the most momentous weekend in human history. The 2 on the Emmaus road were not from Jesus' more intimate circle of friends, the 11 who were waiting back in Jerusalem, but they were probably from the next circle around them, so they would have experienced a lot. We learned that one of them is named Cleopas, the other is unnamed, but it may be possible that they were husband and wife because it seemed that they lived in the same house. We can't be sure, though. As happened in a number of resurrection appearance stories, the 2 disciples did not recognize Jesus at first. So seeing their sad faces as he was walking on the road in the same direction, he probably would have upped his pace to walk beside them. He would have said hello. He began then to ask questions to draw them out. Verse 17. What are you discussing with each other while you walk along? The reply, are you the only stranger in Jerusalem that does not know what's taken place there these days? Jesus plays it dumb. What things? So they poured out the story from their perspective. Well, what a story it was. And then after that time they'd spent with Jesus, how he opened up the scriptures to show them that it was all prophesied and all necessary and all about him. Verse 32, they say their hearts were burning within them when Jesus was with them. Can you remember those times in your Christian walk when your heart was burning within you, where you're too excited maybe to go to sleep after just a wonderful event? A time that comes to mind was ministering through Soma on the island of Pentecost in Vanuatu, an island that's just had a tremendous devastation with this cyclone. But that was the first time when, through my ministry, through my leadership, seeing mass healings, blind people getting healed, lots of them, deaf people, and just seeing the power of God at work. The hearts of the people were burning, and our team was too, knowing that they had had an encounter with the risen Lord Jesus. That's how it would have felt. Well, our 2 disciples on the Emmaus Road had started out the day sad and confused. They ended the day retracing their steps back to Jerusalem to tell the other disciples of their experience. Well, like those two disciples journeying on a road, that's a metaphor that's true for all of us too, that we're walking out our lives on a road that begins from life and ends in heaven if we know Jesus. But it's a difficult journey along the way. But when we encounter the risen Jesus along the way, somehow it gets to be easier, or at least doable. Time seems to fly, and we may even find ourselves taking a different direction. So what are some of the things that Luke is trying to say to us through this powerful story? Well, here's several things that I think we can take away from this encounter. Firstly, from verse 13, we see that Jesus is just as interested in the little people as he is in the leaders. Now, I love this. Most of the stories we see, it's to important people with named disciples who we would know as apostles, but these two, one of them isn't even named. They were, not in the front rank of the disciples. This is the longest of the appearance stories, and it takes place to ordinary people. Jesus wanted them to know that he was alive. They needed to know. And that God was working out his master plan. They mattered to him. They had their idea of how it was all going to work out, but they had missed a few things. They had got it wrong. And so their dreams were shattered. But God was bigger than they thought. And this showed us and showed them that God can resurrect and fulfill what seemed to be impossible dreams. Not many of us here are big shots, but this story teaches us that our journeys matter to God too, and that Jesus died for us as well. And that's good news. Well, next, if we go to verse 15, we see that while they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them. You won't always recognize that Jesus has come near or when he comes near. The resurrection body does not look exactly like the old body. But at a deeper level, God is working his purposes out in and through our lives without us seeing the plan unfolding at first. So is there something going on in your life where things just seem to be lost? You've just put that beyond the bounds of what's realistic now. You thought that you had it together, but the plan has failed. The dream has died, or at least gone to sleep. They thought that it was all over with Jesus' death. But God is bigger than that. And when Jesus comes near, everything in your life can change. Next, if we look at verse 27, we see how Jesus opened the scriptures to them, beginning with Moses and all the prophets. He interpreted to them the things about himself